today we are here with Jordan right there and Laura right there
Hello.
and me right here. So, anyways, aside from pointing at everyone, I want to talk about why you need to move to the cloud with everyone. So, I've brought our team together so that we can kind of talk about, why is everyone moving to the cloud. But it's even more than, why is everyone moving to the cloud. If you're doing business online, for better or for worse, you need to consider moving to the cloud, and you might already be on the cloud and don't even realize it, in a lot of cases even as well. So I guess just to kind of put that out there, so for those who are watching this on YouTube, believe it or not, if you don't quite know what the cloud is, YouTube runs on cloud infrastructure. And so if you're here watching this from YouTube, you are using the cloud. You're using someone's hosting, and you are a consumer on the cloud. And so congratulations if you're watching this because you have made it to the cloud. And we said that you need to move to the cloud, so this is a good start. So I guess some thoughts. So Jordan, when we're talking about the cloud, what would you describe the cloud as in the first place? Because it's one of those kind of confusing concept.
Sure. Well, I mean, a cloud is essentially a networked group of machines that are working together to allow hosting or like some other function basically that people can remotely access, right? Is
Yeah,
kind of essentially.
exactly. And it's like we have all these machines, and then these machines let you access things from a machine. And one of the things that almost everyone's noticed, if you have touched the internet, if you have a cell phone, if you have a laptop, if you've gone on the internet and logged into something, if you have a PlayStation, if you have it doesn't really matter. You've probably run into what are called terms and conditions. And, you know, terms and conditions can be a little frustrating because it's like, well, you can use our cloud platform and you can access this thing under these conditions, which, that can be a little thing. Laura, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about these terms and conditions?
Well, I think they like are showing up on the screen. Oftentimes, they're kind of Well, I think they're written not necessarily to be read. I think most companies assume that people aren't actually going to be reading all these terms. I mean, when was the last time that you actually read through terms and conditions? If you're not, necessarily a cyber security person, or if you're not a lawyer, because a lot of these things are written in like really technical language. And if you don't say yes, then you can't use the platform. If you don't agree to the terms and conditions, then you can't get on, you can't get on Facebook, you can't get on Twitter, you can't use YouTube, you can't do a lot on a lot of these platforms. And so it can be, it is a little like predatory because they do sort of force you to agree, whether you agree or not with like their company practices, if you want to use these platforms.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, think about it this way: is like you're watching us right now, and in order to be able to be watching us right now, you agreed to something. And a lot of you could just think about this. Do you know what you agreed to be watching us right now? And that's my question to you, because it's one of those things that when we just go start using things, there's nothing wrong with watching YouTube or joining the
Well, and
cloud
I think you can
and all those
watch
things.
content like on YouTube without signing a UA, but like a lot. But if you have a profile, if you've created
Yeah,
a
there we go.
profile, if you're collecting videos on a profile, if you're liking
If
things,
you
if
want
you're
to
following
interact with
channels,
YouTube,
yeah, if you want to interact with anything, if you want to have your own channel, then you are
There we go.
definitely
or even just like and dislike videos,
That's right.
exactly, yeah. Yeah, then they kind of force your hand. And then
Yeah.
another thing about these UAs is one of the first items in them often is that they can change them whenever they want to. And yeah, you'll probably get a little email that like, oh, we updated our terms and conditions, but did you agree to that? To these changes? I mean, if you want to keep using the platform, then you have to.
Yeah.
Well, and it's made it very easy for Silicon Valley and e-businesses to mine all our data and harvest all our data, because it's like they just put that in all their EULAs that they can take whatever data they want.
Definitely. Definitely.
And
What can you do?
it's become part of the culture too, where it's like companies in a lot of ways, they might actually, the people running the company might not actually really believe in EULAs and things like that, but because it's culture, and if they're venture backed and things like that, and they're like, well,
Mhm.
we got to have the EULA because that's just how it works. And
Yep.
we do live in a world where people just kind of do things, with what works. But
Well, and I think a lot of times companies, for whatever reason, too, are they're trying to protect their liabilities.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, that's a natural. Their lawyers are telling them that they have to have these things, and like it is a big part of our culture. So, Nato, why are we talking about EULAs today in relation to the cloud?
So that's a good question because, like, there are reasons why you might go and use a different platform for whatever said reason and things like that. But for some of us who, especially, might want to go and develop new technologies or might be working on projects or even just trying to learn, especially if you're trying to learn. So I'm going to just emphasize if you're trying to learn. Now, if you're a professional, you know what you're doing, you know all this stuff, you probably do read EULAs. You probably have to spend time to go and analyze the EULA and all that stuff. But I almost guarantee if you're a learner, you probably have no idea like what's running inside of those things. And if you're just trying to sit there and like figure out how to use this one platform or figure out how to use this one tool, you're trying to learn how to be an ethical hacker and all these things, and you have these good intentions and these good goals, sometimes those goals get complicated where maybe you can't just go and learn or go and explore every little thing. All of a sudden you have like this red tape and these things that get in the way. And
Yep.
so one of the reasons why I want to talk about that is depending on what your goals are, depending on what you're doing, there's benefits to being able to just get your own systems and learn how to use your own systems. And if you know what cloud is, or if you really want to learn cloud, the best way to learn cloud is with something where you don't have, I guess, red tape and all of these weird sticky conditions, where you can just have a way to just learn things, not really worry about like, okay, so this environment that I have here, I'm not going to get in trouble for doing the wrong thing in this crazy environment. To me it's really important to figure out like how can we as businesses make it possible for others to start to learn like what is cloud, because that's a big question, like what is cloud. And most people who want to learn cloud, generally I've learned, just have no idea, even if they have like a general idea of like, oh, like data centers, a whole bunch of servers that act as
Yeah.
one.
And
But
managing cloud's not a simple thing.
yeah, like cloud management's a nightmare because it's like not only do you have all these systems, but then you have terms and conditions for all the applications running in the environment, terms and conditions for all these other things, and then you have all this stuff going on that you have to know or have to navigate. But
Yeah. So I am genuinely curious. Do you guys actually read the ULAs, Nathan? Do you read?
do I?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on if I'm using it for business or not. If I'm using it for business, I absolutely do. If I'm not, that there are times that I might just be like, oh, skim. Okay, that's nice. Because
Jordan, what about you? Do you read the ULAs?
Generally not, but if it's like something where there's going to be like financial stuff involved, then
Definitely.
I do tend to try to.
Mm-hmm.
So like I don't know. If it's like a selling, like a marketplace or something like that, then yeah, I would try to read those. But I mean, yeah, it's
You just
it's hard, and
encounter
like
them
I'm
so
not a
often.
lawyer. I don't understand everything that's in those documents, and
Yeah.
so I don't know.
Yeah, I rarely do. I went through this period after I watched that like South Park episode about ULAs, and I was like, oh, I better start reading these.
so
But the other thing that's funny about that episode is
Yeah.
that they kind of make it out like most people actually read the ULAs, and it's like
Yeah,
actually
which is
no, who actually reads those things?
Yeah, most people have no idea what those terms are.
Yeah.
And if you've ever worked for a software company in on an investigations team of any sort, and you go to do the investigations, you'll learn that in almost every investigation, no one read the EULA.
So you
And
just signed your soul away to
Yeah.
something without even
Sure, that's true.
realizing.
Yeah, and if you've ever been just like a professional, like, because I come from cybersecurity, you're gonna run into that, and
Mhm.
people just use stuff, and it can get folks into trouble and things like that at times. For better or for worse, I've seen some things go very poorly for people who didn't read the EULA, but once again, that's when it becomes predatory. When there's like a business who creates these EULAs and they sit there, whoever's creating a EULA has generally they have the working knowledge that most people aren't going to read through all of this. And then even they, if you talk to them, you're like, well, did you read the EULA? They ask that question themselves because they also, like most people
they know
don't,
that your
and
answer's
they know
gonna
that
be
most
no.
people's answers be no. And when someone says, yeah, I did read the EULA, and then they'll start to drill you, and then even then as soon as they start asking questions about the EULA they wrote, they're like, yeah, they didn't read the
Yeah.
EULA. And so, it just kind of comes, and then on top of that, let's say you did read the EULA. Another thing that makes it predatory is you're probably going to forget half of what you read, even
Well,
if you didn't read it.
and like we were saying at the very beginning, is like if you want to use this thing, you have to agree. Like if you need this
Yeah, well,
tool, you
that's
have
another
to
thing.
agree. You don't
Yeah,
really
if you
have a choice.
disagree with it, what do you can't really do anything except for just not join the platform. So unless you have a team of lawyers and more money than you know what to do with, then you can actually go after some of the, and try and force some of these companies' hands on their bad EULAs and their predatory EULAs. But well, very few of us have those kinds of resources.
Exactly.
So and that they definitely are counting on that fact. So
Yeah, and it's like, and a lot of different companies do it different ways. I think it gets especially tricky when some companies intentionally structure their EULAs in a way to try to get some gotchas.
Yeah.
Because that's out there. But
Yeah, it definitely goes back to that predatory nature.
yeah. And so nowadays you're starting to see a lot more like open source where they're just like, I don't know, just download it and use it.
yeah.
And
the risk is on you.
Yeah.
and in cloud, I think it's a little more complicated because on one end, the purpose of the EULA is like, let's say that you are buying some business software and they have like a whole software team and your company's paying $80,000 a year to use this software platform. Okay, you probably did for that platform read the EULA. You're probably going to do all that stuff, and then the benefit there is much more for that $80,000. You're getting like their support team, their assistance, their knowledge, their trade business, like all the things that they're willing to give you for a price. So there are ways to do it right, but then there are a lot of times that we see these days where people try to find like where it goes from like doing it right to seeing like where they can get an extra something out of it.
Yeah.
But how can you get around that? And I guess since you're the hardware person here, Jordan, how do you feel about like how would you get around if you wanted to build something on a piece of infrastructure where you didn't have to worry about a EULA? How can I have a piece of cloud infrastructure without having to worry about a EULA?
Sure, I mean, you can build your own on Raspberry Pis or whatever
Yeah.
cheap infrastructure you can get your hands on.
Yeah,
But,
pretty much. Just build
yeah.
your own stuff. And it's
Do it
like,
yourself.
if anyone's wondering, like, oh, you guys are monetizing this video. We actually don't monetize our videos right now. At some point, we'll monetize the videos and stuff. But really, we don't get any money out of telling you to just go build your own stuff. We're just like, yeah, just go build your own stuff. Oh yeah, just go build your own software. But there's a benefit to that, though. There's a benefit to just being able to just like go and learn and grow and being able to have your own infrastructure. Let's say that you wanted to go and learn how to be like a cybersecurity professional, and then at some point you wanted to go and like teach people or something along those lines. Well, if you're trying to learn and you're trying to like get those skills, once again, if you have your own ecosystem and your own hardware that you have, you don't have to sign off like, I agree that I'm not going to do XYZ to this platform or this thing. So if you want to get away from that, because people have asked me in the past, well, how do you learn real world things? Get your own stuff. That's how you learn real world things. And then you can also productize your own things. So it's like, some learning platforms, let's say that you go and join some learning cloud platform, they'll be like, well, you can't monetize what you do here. But if you get your own stuff, your own hardware, your own ecosystem, and you just start building in it, and it's yours, well, not only can you learn in it, let's say that you do build something that you at some point want to use for business. there's no term and condition that says that you can't use your environment.
How would you recommend somebody like start learning in a case like that? You're saying, oh, you can just go out and get your stuff and then you can learn it, but like, I don't know. For me, if I grab the tools, I might not necessarily even know what to do with them. So
Well, that's the real question. And so that's why we exist, because I do run a DevSecOps dojo, and while we're not making a pitch right now, we actually haven't even, at this time of watching this video, haven't even opened up the dojo for people to come into. You can apply to it right now if you felt like it. But you can go and find education and places where people teach you. And on my YouTube channel, I talk about that sort of thing all the time. So you can already go and take a look at my YouTube channel and learn how can you go ahead and start learning these things and check out all of this stuff. And we talk about that sort of thing routinely and regularly, and we don't ask you for your money. Now, if you want to pay us for something, that's up to you. And now, what we are doing soon is reopening the DevSecOps dojo, and that is going to be an option for folks who are just like, well, okay, I do kind of want to just go get my own infrastructure and not really worry about it, but I need to know how it works, and I need to know how to do it, and I need the skills and the knowledge. That's what we do. But, you know, until you feel ready to do something like that, because it is a senior option to join the DevSecOps dojo. It's not for beginners, because some of you are going to ask me, well, how do I learn this as a beginner? As a beginner, I would say maybe spend a lot of time on YouTube, and maybe go build a gaming computer.
Yeah.
Building a gaming computer is a great start. It doesn't even have, you could just build your own computer. Building your own PC, if you want to start learning cloud sits on top of hardware. If you don't know what cloud sits on top of, there's just a lot of learning that comes with just at least learning that, like learning the most basic thing about cloud. And then, you know, some of you might be like, well, but building my own computer, that's not a cloud. It's like, well, but cloud runs off of computers.
right. I think that's another thing that people who are maybe a little less technical don't necessarily think about is like, you know, you think of the cloud as like some ephemeral thing that exists in like cyberspace or around the internet, but it's like, of course, these things actually do have, like, exist on real hardware somewhere.
Yeah, it's a machine.
It is on a machine somewhere. It's
Yeah.
just not in your house.
Well, and it generally is existing on a lot of machines, which is
Yeah.
one of the things that makes it complicated.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, if you want to learn how to work with a lot of machines, you still have to start with learning how to work with at least one. And so
Sure.
everything that they're saying is exactly right, and it's just like, let's say that you do want to have like your own ecosystem, your own environment, your own developer space, your own everything that you want to do. Whether or not you want to go and turn it into a cloud long term or try other things and all this other stuff, if you just have your own environment, it just gives you freedom and it gives you flexibility, and you can basically just find out everything that you'd need to know, and then by the time you go work with an actual like environment, like let's say that you then go work with AWS or something like that, you'll be familiar with what's on the other side of AWS. Because on the other side of AWS, the side that you don't see, like you're sitting there looking through this little like browser screen, but on the other side, it's no different from that machine sitting in your apartment or your house or wherever you are, depends on where you live. But learn that, and then that opens doors right there, because I get people asking, well, how do you get... So if you want to get to the point where you can be a little more senior and have the skills to be like, okay, I think I'm ready to start doing business, I'd say start building your own computer. So
Yeah. And put Linux on it. Learn Linux a little bit. That'll help you a lot.
Linux goes a long ways. There's all kinds of flavors of Linux. It doesn't even matter which one you try. Just start trying
totally.
Linux. Just learning how to get Linux to run on a machine is a lesson.
Yeah, no, that's what I was saying. And especially if you're like managing a dual boot or something where you want your Windows and your Linux, and you're going to have to learn a little bit about, storage management and things like that. So I don't know. Any of those things help.
Oh,
That'll
totally.
help us.
Like Laura, you started learning things like imaging more recently than like Jordan and I. Like, would
Okay,
you
so,
say for
so
someone
help me translate some of these things that I know how to do now to like cloud skills. So like, yeah, okay, I can image an operating system,
but I have a
and
question.
I know how to use Linux, and
Was it hard to learn how to image? That's what I'm trying to ask. Like, was it hard? I'm trying to like find out. Like, for someone who's never touched it, I've done
well,
these
I
things
went
for
through a
years, but
tutorial.
like, did it
I
feel
did a
impossible?
tutorial that originally was like your Orange Pi tutorial,
Right.
and so it was like a step-by-step walkthrough. And then once I did it once, it was easier to do again.
Right. So I guess my big question is, when you first started trying to do imaging, was it hard to do for the first time, and did it feel impossible? I guess that's what I was trying
I
to
mean,
ask.
I don't think anything's impossible. I just downloaded the necessary hardware onto my computer, and then I imaged an operating system.
And it wasn't too bad, right?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't bad. It's definitely doable, and I feel like there's lots of resources and guides that will like teach you how to do
Internet's
that.
your friend. There's lots of guides out there on how to do almost anything.
But that
Yeah.
brings me back to the question of how does imaging an operating system then translate into cloud skills?
So imaging an operating system is basically, how do you get cloud in the first place? Is you start with a machine, and in order for the machine to do anything, then you have to put an operating system on it. And then for cloud, then Linux is usually the operating system that sits on top of the hardware, and then the operating system is what allows multiple types of hardware to talk to each other as one. So without having the operating system, you can't have multiple computers talk. And so it's kind of the same way as like, how do you browse the internet? If you want to browse the internet, you have to have a hardware first, of course, desktop, laptop, and then once you have the hardware, then you have to have the operating system that lets you, same way, connect to other machines. Because believe it or not, when you connect to cloud, even just like going to YouTube to watch this, you are connecting to other systems just as a viewer or a user. You're not like an administrator, or like you're not the one who like owns and runs those systems, but you're still using cloud. And so in order for that to be possible, whether you're setting up multiple systems to run as one cloud, or you're just a user trying to access a cloud, it just has to start with learning things like applying an image that's going to allow you to accomplish goals to a set of hardware, which can get really confusing.
Sure.
If that
Sure.
answers your question. So it's all the cloud things. So I guess at the end of the day, if you want to get into cloud, you just need to start doing things.
So I guess that kind of transitions to like maybe the next part of this conversation, which is like, why should people care about moving into the cloud? Why do we need to move to the cloud?
So that's a very good question. That's I guess that's a really loaded question, but I'll try to answer that, and maybe we see what Jordan thinks too. But I'll try my best to see like why is everyone moving to the cloud in a way without me being too confusing. So like, in our modern climate, technology gets more advanced rapidly, constantly, and people are always trying to get more connected. People are always trying to find ways to get more connected. And you can look at just about any type of technology we have out there, like whether it's like satellite technology that's talking to like cell phones, whether it's like wired connections talking to our like laptops or whatever. We're always trying to get more things to make it easier for people to just like congregate and communicate. And so the reason why everyone's moving to cloud is because cloud basically is a technology that takes like a whole bunch of really boring manual steps that make it really hard to make it for us to have the internet and stuff. So in order for like YouTube and Facebook and all of those things to exist even, and we look at these like giants and these big tech companies and all that stuff, the reason why we need cloud these days is all of a sudden we've realized that, hey, we can bring more people together if we figure out how to make these machines make it easier for people to connect. And so now that there's no other technology that does that better than what we've established with basically setting up multiple things that bring people together over a network, now people are like, okay, I guess I have to go to cloud, because if you don't, you just can't keep up. I guess that's the blunt thing, is you're just not going to keep up with the climate. If you've ever looked at technology, if you don't want to be obsolete, I guess that's maybe the most blunt one, is if you don't want to be obsolete and you want to be able to continue to connect with the modern things, then moving to cloud is the thing that is what people are inevitably having to figure out how to do. And one of the other reasons why cloud is, it's challenging. Think about why you have to replace a cell phone on a routine basis. There are a lot of reasons why you might replace a cell phone. Maybe you just want a new model. Okay, maybe that's fine. Maybe you also so happen to have damaged your phone and something happened to you, dropped it and the screen cracked. Or your hard drive filled up and you're like, oh no, my hard drive's full. Anytime something happens to the device itself, or your hard drive's full, or whatever's going on with these things, all of a sudden you need to go get a new phone. And it's like, you're not going to magically have more hard drive space on your phone. But with cloud says, well, we can have more of things and just have ways to add more hardware, where even phones can get cloud storage, where maybe your phone has limitations, but on the other side, other people can have machines where, let's say that there's more storage for all the users, everyone can have more storage. So cloud makes it so that, like, the limitations that come from hardware not being something that can grow organically like an organism. The internet grows organically and just grows rapidly. People, we're organisms, so like from being like a child to growing up, like we grow organically, but in a way, like machines, when we get to the internet, with us getting more and more and more and more and more and more, and then more people, more everything, we need to find ways for, I guess, technology to be more organic so that it can grow too, and the cloud allows us to add sort of that organic nature to technology, I guess, Jordan, what are your thoughts on, like, why are we moving to cloud, or why is everyone moving to cloud?
Well, so I mean, I'm essentially going to say the same things you just did, but maybe a little more concisely. So it's scalable, right? Like that's what you were just describing. The fact that the cloud is easily scalable. It's not really. It doesn't like. It's not viable for Google to host everything they do off of a single server, right? Like, I mean, they need thousands and thousands of servers to do what they do. So maybe they're not a great example, but basically one server is not enough. So if you have the cloud, then you've got all these different servers working in concert. And if you need more resources, you just add another server. Whereas like what Nathan is saying, if you're kind of more built on like limited infrastructure or like single systems, then when you start needing more resources, like you can only upgrade so far with the single system before you're just going to have to outright replace it. And that's really difficult. So if you kind of have a system like the cloud that you can just add stuff to as you go, and if something dies, you just replace that. You're not like replacing the entire thing. It's scalable. I mean, that's the word for it. So it's scalable. I think that's the major thing. I think it's also redundant. So that's the other big thing, because you have all these systems. One dies, again, you don't lose everything. It's accessible, right? Like depending on how you have your cloud set up, you can potentially make it so that people all over can access things more easily. And if you've got it set up right, it's high availability. So I guess those are the reasons I see why everyone is moving to the cloud, why all these major corporations are moving to the cloud, and the rest of us are going whether or not we like it. So
totally. And high availability matters.
It does seem to be the way of the future, like it's certainly not going away, and if anything, it's just getting like becoming more and more relevant. So really, the sooner you can kind of make these transitions to using more of a cloud-based infrastructure, the better off you'll be. Do you guys agree with that assessment?
Totally.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you want to be relevant in an IT workplace, you're probably going to need to know like how to manage clouds and the skills that are involved with all of that. So
absolutely. Yeah. I think that's another great point, is like, more and more these skills are just becoming more and more important for everyone to have.
Yeah, and like there's a reason why, like in the dojo, it's like we teach not just how do you make a machine work so that you can host cloud and things like that, but like how do you actually take something that you made, and then how do you introduce that into a market? How do you get
Yep.
users for it? How does it work? Like, because it's not just like go and get this hardware and then it just magically will let you run cloud. It's if you go and get an AWS account or an Azure account, it's going to be the same thing. You're not going to just get one of these accounts and then just magically have hosting for all these magical things. No matter what you do, it's all going to be hard. It's all going to be complicated. It's all going to be tricky. And
Yep.
depending on what you're doing, like if you're a great big enterprise business, then you do have like compliance regulations, and then licenses at that junction make a lot of sense because they need to make sure that things are going to be a certain way. But if you're at home and you're like, I don't know what cloud is. I want to learn this thing. I'm going to try to build my own cloud You don't know what you can or can't do, and then on top of that, you don't yet at that junction necessarily know all the different things that you might need or what you shouldn't do and stuff like that. And then you also don't know how the billing might work. If you touch one of these like other large platforms, all of a sudden there's like billing, and if you don't know enough about how that works, it can be
Yeah, it can get really complicated and really expensive really fast. And
yeah.
but the other thing about it is it seems like there are a lot of really great like open source tools that you can use for cloud development these days, and not
So
to get
many.
too into the weeds, but like containerization seems like a big part of it, which is probably something
Yep.
you guys can talk to a lot more than I can. But it's it does seem like these are valuable skills to be learning, and yeah. So cloud native. Let's talk about cloud native and like what is cloud native.
So cloud native, as I'm adding right here.
Yeah.
So cloud native is actually there's something called the Cloud Native Computing Foundation or something along those. That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Native
Cloud Native Computing Foundation.
Yeah. So the Cloud Native Computing Foundation basically went and found a way to bring together a bunch of independent projects and resources and tools, and made it easier for people to build scalable cloud resources where you can go and find the tools and the applications and all of the resources and the strategies and the architectures and things like that. Well, Cloud Native, they've built guidelines and all these different things so that you don't necessarily have to know everything about cloud. You could just actually go and check out the Cloud Native Foundation and just get started with what they have there. Now, if you are a practitioner and you know all these things, then you probably already know what Cloud Native is, and then you probably already know how to navigate all these things. But anyone who's really new to like cloud development, and you're trying to get started with this stuff like right away, and you want to do it right without having all these complications down the road, just go straight to the Cloud Native website and check out the Cloud Native landscape, and just start with using the tools and resources that they have and the recommendations there. And the Cloud Native Foundation just makes it easier to get going. I guess that's maybe the best way to put it is they make it easier to get started in cloud. And when we're talking about cloud, we're not talking about a lot of, what, because there's that question of like, well, what's cloud to? Because some folks will say, oh, well, cloud's becoming obsolete. And that's
if
a
you're
confusing.
saying that, then you're probably not in the industry
Yeah,
or have any knowledge of what's actually happening.
So, because cloud is one of those things, we're not going to get away from cloud. Now, cloud for consumers might have a time, like a limited time frame on it or whatever. Well, maybe, who knows? Because as technologies get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, a Raspberry Pi lets you build a cloud that you can just like sit on top of your desk, and so I don't see people stopping wanting to use those types of things for development projects. And so, if anything, maybe, well, cloud's just getting more dynamic by the day. But
More
really,
dynamic, more accessible. And
all cloud is just say if the minute you start using more than one set of hardware to basically have supercomputing is what you could call it, and multiple machines are operating together as to achieve one goal, well, that's cloud. And it, like, unless we can come up with a way to just like water a machine and watch it grow and scale that way with sunlight, we're not that's not something that we have. And so the only way to grow and scale machines is just by adding more hardware. So for those who are confused by how that works, I guess if you've ever heard of virtual machines and containerization, a lot of these terms can get confusing where they're like, well, containers are cloud. Well, containers might be cloud, and then some people might be like, well, virtual machines are cloud. Well, virtual machines might be cloud, and then hardware. It's all confusing
Mm-hmm.
because cloud is all of it. So it's not that containers are cloud. They are. They can be if you use them in an architecture with multiple systems. And same with virtual machines, same with like systems.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't really matter, I guess, what type of system that you're bringing together, but that's essentially what cloud is. And that's why, you can learn these things at home, and you can learn these things without necessarily having multi-millions of dollars. And then, better yet, let's say that you're trying to develop something. A lot of times it can be very expensive to develop things because time alone is painfully expensive, if we're just blunt. Development takes so long and requires so much dedication and focus and all that, that like you need to have enough resources to basically survive for long stretches.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you have a development team, then that means you have to feed the entire team for long stretches where there might not be any income during these development stretches. And that's partly why development gets so expensive. And so, when you start developing your own stuff on your own infrastructure, especially for beginners and things like that, then you don't have all these other outliers and things like that. And maybe you can move a project to something like Azure down the road or something like that if you starting to understand things, and then billing is no longer a risk and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of risks to navigate when you're just trying to get a new project off the ground. And so I would go so far as to say that if you're trying to learn cloud, get your own infrastructure just to kind of if you've never learned any of these things, it just makes a difference in my opinion. And the sooner you just start learning things, then it's just knowledge that's going to carry into the future, because this anything you learn that's related to cloud and systems is going to benefit you down the road no matter what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's how I feel about it. You guys have any other thoughts? I guess.
I would just add, I think that if this is something that you think is interesting, if it is something that if you already have some like foundations in cloud tech, in like what is cloud, and maybe you know how to like pull containers or whatever, but you want to keep growing your skills, that's where something like the DevSecOps Dojo that we offer at Cloud Underground comes into play. And so if that is something that is interesting to you, go check us out on LinkedIn. We'll make sure to link the Cloud Underground LinkedIn, and keep, go follow us there and keep tuned in for some more updates that are coming about the DevSecOps Dojo in coming weeks. We're going to be reopening that to new people, and we're just excited to see what people create and build and learn while they're in there.
Totally. So, if you're trying to learn cloud things and you don't want to do it alone, you can talk to us and we'll help you out too.
Yeah,
So,
and the Ask NATO YouTube channel is also a great resource for if you're, trying to learn certain skills. There's lots of free resources out there.
That's right. So, get out there and get learning. So, thanks for watching.
Cool. See you guys.
Bye.